Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Delegate Corner. I'm your host, Sinkas, and today I'm chatting with Katie Garcia. Katie is the head of operations at UDHC Finance and a MakerDAO OG. She's a delegate as well as a member of the Grants Council, and she has a lot of insights to share. She does a great job reminding us of the humanitarian side of delegates and of the governance work in general. Let's dive into what he has to say. Hello, Katie, and welcome to Delegate Corner.
Hey, Sinkas, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on the show. So, I'd like to start by just learning a little bit more about you. So, whenever you're ready, just dive into how you got into the space, your background, things like that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from the Bay Area. This is where I grew up. And I went to college. After college, I moved to Tahoe, California, where I was kind of a ski bum for a while. I was bartending and skiing and then traveling in the off season, and it was amazing. I did that for about 7 years. And then I realized after 7 years of that I needed to start a career. So I moved back to the Bay Area. I worked at Virgin America, which is an airline, for a few years, and I did flight operations, which was crazy. It was awesome. I loved it. And then I moved on to Facebook. Was there for a few years. I did media operations, and I also managed the onboarding program for new designers. And I really liked my time at Facebook as well, but I was kind of looking for something different. Like I didn't feel like I was making that much of an impact. I wasn't feeling very like fulfilled in my career. So I kind of just opened up my LinkedIn to new opportunities, and I got a message from this recruiting firm that was hired by the Maker Foundation about a job in crypto, which I knew absolutely nothing about at the time. This was in like 2018. So kind of like early days still in a lot of ways. And I did a little bit of research, went in for the interview, and I got hired and just like went like dove headfirst into everything. It was like such an amazing experience. So when I started at the Maker Foundation, there was like 30 people, I want to say, mostly developers. And I was hired as the operations manager. So managing all the internal operations, which was kind of a mess at first, but we went from 30 people to over 100 to back down to like zero when the foundation dissolved, which was about 2 years ago. And then the core executive team from the Maker Foundation and I started our own investment firm, which is called UDHC Finance, which is where I currently am today. And the great thing about UDHC is I get like a 360 view of everything that's going on in the space. So at Maker, obviously, we were 100% focused on everything Maker and the protocol there. And now I get to look at all these awesome projects and see what all the different ideas that people have. It's like everything from DeFi to we recently saw a pitch deck for decentralized beauty products. So it's really cool to see all the different things that are happening in the space. And yeah, I've been around for, I guess, over 5 years now, and I've loved every minute of it. It's been amazing.
Damn, that's very interesting. Usually, most of the people I've spoken with, both on the podcast but also like in general, they kind of like got into crypto first throughout like personal interest and then found a job in the space. So I'm curious to know what it was like just getting immediately to a job in the space and not having only, to adapt to your new work environment, colleagues and all that, but also at the same time have to learn all that, that in like crypto entails, right? Because it's not just do your job, but there are so many components basically that go into it. So
Yeah,
I'd love to get your
totally.
perspective on that. How you
Yeah,
think it.
I know. I feel like I'm really lucky because it's hard for people, I think, to find a job in the space just like right away. And I kind of fell into it without having any experience. So I feel like I'm super lucky. But it was definitely crazy and very intimidating. I mean, there's so much to learn, and I learned a lot through osmosis, just through like working with like some of the most talented people in the space, and just through like conversations with them. And we had an office at the time in the town that I live in Santa Cruz, so I got a lot of face-to-face time with people, and I was in so many different conversations, and so I really got to learn that way. Which was like fantastic. I mean, it's really like just very like hands-on, dove right in, and it was, yeah, definitely, like I said, like very lucky because there's a lot of people that they kind of like find it as a hobby and then get a job in the space. And it was like the opposite for me. So, and then I felt like, oh, cool. Like I finally found the thing where I feel like I can like make a difference and be a part of something like bigger and like cool where it's actually like making an impact and not just like another cog in the wheel of like a big corporation. So
Yeah, no, I know for sure. Like my journey was different. Like I started as a hobby and then it evolved into a job. So yeah, really great to see and interesting to see the other side of that coin. And other than like, I assume governance, since you're a delegate, it's kind of like something that interests you in DAOs in general. But what are some other things in the space that kind of like make you tick, if you will? Do you have an interest in NFTs or DeFi trading even? Is there anything else apart from governance?
I mean, governance is obviously like my number one thing because my background is operations and I have a degree in psychology, and governance is kind of like the intersection of those things. It's like people and operations. So governance is my bread and butter for sure. But DeFi is like another, I mean, that's like my main focus, really. And really just like the financial inclusion aspect of it. One of the things I love the most about this space is like literally anyone can be involved. Like you can be yourself, you can be anonymous, you can pretend to be someone else. Like no one cares. If you're here and you're like building cool things, like that's all people care about. Like if you're contributing to the space in a positive way, then like it's awesome for you to be here. And like there's the barrier entry is like still fairly high just because of like UX issues, but there's nothing stopping anyone from joining. I like it's 24/7, decentral. Like you can be anywhere in the world, and like that's one of my favorite things. I think it's just like super awesome, the financial inclusion aspect and um kind of like giving the power back to the individual by getting rid of the central intermediaries. Um, I really love that aspect too. So like the decentralized finance is kind of like my favorite thing. I'm a little partial, obviously, because I had my start at Maker, but DeFi is like, yeah, where
Yeah,
it's at for
DeFi
me.
is pretty interesting. And absolutely agree on all the other points you mentioned, especially like I see my friends, making their resumes, trying to get a job, having their LinkedIn accounts, taking headshots so they can put it on the resume. It's so funny that in crypto, you can be like a Twitter account and, and if you're a contributor and you're active and you show that, nobody cares who you are or where you're from or, even your education. If they see that you are great at what you're doing and you are active and passionate, then you do have a chance at being successful in the space, which is very,
Totally. I love that. Like I've worked with so many people that I've like never even met, you know, which I mean, I would love to meet them, but it's also like they're here and they're contributing and building cool things, and that's like the only thing that really matters. So
yeah,
I love that aspect.
absolutely. And all right, and what brought you to Optimism? You're a delegate on Optimism, so I'm curious to know what brought you to Optimism in the first place. Was it its governance? Was it something else before that? What happened?
Yeah. I think I was like one of the first people to put up my delegate profile, but it was a colleague of mine that kind of introduced me to it. And I looked at their governance structure and just was like totally intrigued. The bicameral governance structure, it was like super interesting. And then the thing that really attracted me the most was the commitment to like innovation and change and like experimentation, because that wasn't really something that we could do very much at Maker. So the thing I love about Optimism is like how different every season has been and how we're learning from our mistakes and like improving in the next seasons. Like the first season was totally crazy with every single delegate voting on every single proposal wasn't sustainable. So we learned from that, came out with the committee model, which sounded great in theory, but it like in practice didn't really work out that well. So then we scrapped that, and now we're doing the grants council model, which obviously I'm a little bit impartial because I'm on the grants council, but I feel like it's going very well. It's a lot more streamlined, effective, efficient process. And these are all just like learnings from previous seasons that we've taken and like applied to the next season. And that's the thing that I love the most about Optimism, just the constant like improvement and learning and not being afraid to try new things.
Yeah,
It's been
definitely
really
love
cool.
the iterative version of of Optimism and its governance. I love how we take learnings from previous seasons and evolve that. All right, and how like what was the thing that urged you to, you came to Optimism. What was the thing that urged you to actually post your delegate mission statement and get involved with governance, and then sometime later with the grants council as well?
Yeah, just reading the governance documents and like everything about like the public goods funding and the governance structure that they were building, and then just like the overall ethos and vibe. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but like the vibe was great. Like, I just love the optimistic vision and the community. And yeah, I wasn't really sure how it was gonna all play out. And it's really been like an awesome journey. Like, and I've loved it. It's been great.
Yeah, something resonated within. All right.
Yeah.
And so delegates are, an interesting thing because it's mostly like an invisible job, if you will. They don't get as much appreciation as I feel they deserve. But and it's a hard job as well, right? There's so much information to keep on top of, decisions to make that have implications that you can either think of or not think of at the time of making them. So I'm curious, what do you think is the most difficult thing when it comes to being a delegate?
The hardest thing is probably just like the workload and staying up to date with everything that's going on. I think, yeah, I mean, you have to have like a real interest and commitment to the project, because the financial incentives alone aren't really enough, I don't think, to like motivate people. So I think, yeah, the biggest thing is really just like having like a genuine like interest and commitment to the project, is like super important. And yeah, because the workload is really intense.
Mhm.
But if you're enjoying it and you're here because of that, then it makes it like not as hard. But yeah, staying up to date with everything and yeah, just like managing the workload, because most of us, like, this isn't like a full-time job. Like, I have like another like job. So it's kind of just like something that I do on top of my regular work. So it's a lot, but it's worth it for me because I like believe in the project and all that.
Yeah, I think in general, like in the space, there's this saying of, just keeping up with the news is a full-time job. And I think it's even more so when it comes to like DAO related, like things that happen on Optimism every day, every week. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely agree on that. And
It's like
what
there's like dog years and there's crypto years, you know? It's like one normal year is like 10 crypto years.
absolutely, absolutely on that one. And what are some, core values that you think a delegate should have in order to be like successful in what they do?
I think the number one thing is just like commitment to the project and the vision, and then also transparency, like how and why you're voting the way that you are and communicating that, and just being engaged, like interacting with like the community and other delegates and just being involved, I think is super important.
Yeah, definitely agree on that one. And on the practical side, what are some best practices that you think or seen work well being a delegate?
Yeah, communicating about your votes is really important, I think, whether it's like in a delegate communication thread or if it's on the proposal itself, but just letting people know your reasoning behind your votes. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like, a manifesto, like 1 to 2 lines is fine, just as long as you're kind of like explaining your reasoning for voting the way that you are, and just like being very communicative about that.
hmm And when you're, since you mentioned, putting out your reasoning for vote, what is your decision-making framework if you have one? How do you evaluate proposals and then vote on them? What are some of the things that you take into consideration when making your decisions?
Yeah, so for the Grants Council, we have a rubric that we use. So obviously, like I use that for all the Grants Council stuff, but for proposals outside of that, I have my own valuations framework that I use, but it's actually very similar to the rubric for the Grants Council. So when we came out with the Grants Council rubric, we kind of took like everyone's individual valuation frameworks and put that together into like one. Um, so it really has like most of the same components as the Grants Council rubric. but really it's just like the like measuring impact and like the amount of growth and like new people that it brings in.
Hmm. Yeah. And taking a step back, where do you see, or how do you see Optimism's governance as it is right now? Where do you think we are strong? Where do you think we are lacking? What are some things we could experiment more with? Um, what's your views on that?
Yeah, I think um where things are now are great in terms of the grants council. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm on the grants council, but I feel like that's something that's going really well. It's like made everything a lot more efficient. I think there's room for improvement, like with the mission proposals. I don't think there was any way that anyone could have predicted the sheer volume of proposals that we received. So I'd like to see something done about that, whether it's like a council model. Or I'm sure Justine probably has some like better ideas about ways to improve that. And then also like a team that's going to do like milestone assessment. So whether it's like another council type model or something like that, but holding all the projects accountable for meeting their milestones. That would be super awesome to see. And what else? Oh, more of an emphasis on the retro public goods funding. So like the best way to measure the impact of something is like once it's already done. So I'd love to see more of the retro funding because I feel like that's more effective than anything else. And yeah, I mean, overall, it's just like every season has been so different. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's coming up next. I know we're starting a new season in a few weeks here, or I guess the reflection period, and we'll know more about what's coming. But hearing about everything that's coming up in like the new season seriously feels like Christmas morning or something. It's like there's so much to look forward to and like so many cool changes. And I feel like the foundation does a fantastic job of taking the feedback from delegates and community members and like making improvements and changes based on feedback. So
Mhm.
I'm like super stoked to see what's coming next.
Yeah, very, very good insights. It's funny that you mentioned, giving more emphasis on RPGF because it's easier to measure the impact of something after it's done. I had a very interesting conversation with Renee, who goes by the name Lee on the forums, about basically when I was deciding the mission proposal for the podcast. It was, she brought up the idea of metrics and KPIs for the podcast, and like, how can I measure that ahead of time? And provide with something that's actually based on reality without knowing those metrics ahead of time. So it's, yeah, I definitely hear you on
It's
the.
so hard. Yeah, and there was a lot of mission proposals where I was like, this would be like the perfect fit for retro PGF. Like it's so hard to know how something is going to turn out like without anything to go by. Like there's like no metrics, like no performance to measure. So there was like tons of missions where I was like, this would be the perfect candidate for retro PGF. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm hoping to see more of that and just like I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made for missions like in general.
Mhm.
But your mission is going great. I love your podcast. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, and Jack Anorak actually said the same thing about the podcast. Like, it would be a perfect candidate for RPGF, which I also agree. But during the missions, I think the idea was to try and experiment with funding ahead of time as opposed to RPGF. So that's why I went through with it anyway. But yeah,
yeah.
speaking of RPGF and missions, I'm curious to see like what your retrospective of them were. Like, where do you think we could like actually, what would you change, if anything, on those two initiatives?
There's so much I would change. The last round was insane. It went really well. And I think one of the things that was really special about it was that every single project received like some amount of funding, which is amazing. I think there was like, I want to say 119 projects that were nominated, like some crazy number. So the workload and like just the volume of projects to review was like absolutely insane. But I know there are a lot of mission proposals that are working on improvements for that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that goes. Like, I'm really not sure what the solution is, um, because it was just such a like just managing that volume is pretty crazy. So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see what this next round is going to be like and the improvements that are going to be made, but it was definitely uh, a crazy experience.
Yeah, and I think it played to the fact that there was the both like grants council applications and mission proposal at the same time, and it was just a lot of work at the same time. So
Oh,
that
for the missions. Yeah. No, I was talking about the
yeah.
retro PGF. Yeah. That was, I don't think the Grants Council was going on at the same time, luckily. So it was like I was just focusing on those,
Mhm.
but it was, I mean, it was still just like an insane workload. And I had just had twins. I think they were like a month old at the time. So it was just like a really
Congratulations,
crazy,
you know that.
thanks. Yeah, it was a really crazy time in my life, but an awesome experience as well. And I'm like super thankful that I had the opportunity to participate in that.
Yeah.
And in the next round.
Mhm. All right. And what do you see the OP collective 1 or 2 years from now, or rather, where would you like to see it?
Yeah, just more experimentation. I would love to see, like I said before, kind of like a, I don't know what it would be called, like a milestone assessment type team. And like the grants being more geared towards like retroactive funding. Like I'd love to see that because I think in the long term it makes a lot more sense. And like I just don't even n- I don't even know, like there's no way that I could have predicted like from season one to where we are now. So it's really hard to predict like where we would be in like a year from now because it's so vastly different from where we were this time last year. Um but I mean, there's definitely a lot of areas for improvement. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing like what happens.
Mhm. And what do you think is the biggest challenge that we'd probably face, in the next year or two, trying to get where we want to go?
I think every DAO has the same challenges of like inefficiencies and the asynchronous communication. And one of the biggest challenges too that not that many people talk about is like the humanity aspect. Like with so many people working together online, I think we forget that there's like actually a human behind the screen that you're talking to. Like we're all just like people. Um, and I think that's just like a problem that every DAO has. Like it's not specific to Optimism, and Optimism does like a really great job of keeping things positive. But overall, it's just like DAOs can be like inefficient in a lot of ways, just with like the communication and then like the yeah, just the whole like not having that human connection, which I think is so important, which is like why it's like super important to go to conferences and meetups and actually like create those like in-person relationships.
Hmm. Absolutely agree on that front. We are all humans at the end of the day, and it's important to remember that both, what, especially actually when you're arguing with somebody on the forums, no, you just it's another human being behind the username, and they do have other responsibilities and a life. So yeah,
Yeah,
everybody.
totally. And it's like, dude, like we wouldn't have this conversation, like these conversations that we have with each other on the forum and on Discord, like in person. Like there's no way you would like talk to someone like that in person.
Yeah.
And it's like it's easy to forget that there's like a human on the other side of the screen.
Mhm.
So yeah, for sure.
All right, and going to the humans on the other side of the screen, which are delegates, where, can you think of a delegate that, despite their contributions to the collective, hasn't received as much voting power or love, as I like to put it, that hasn't received as much as they deserve, basically.
Yeah, I think a new delegate that comes to mind is Brescia.
Mhm.
She's been awesome. Like she joined fairly recently and has been like super engaged and involved in everything. I'm actually giving her my badge for Retro PGF for the Citizens House because I'm like super impressed with her involvement and everything. And then another person is OP user. Like he has been so involved in everything and like very active as a delegate and hasn't really received a ton of delegation as far as I know. And I would actually love to see him on the podcast because I don't know much about him. He was actually on the other DeFi committee In season two, I was on committee A and he was on the committee B or whatever. But yeah, I'd love to see him on the podcast and get to know about him a little bit more as like a delegate and a person. So yeah, those are the two that like are top of mind when I think of like smaller delegates that are like super involved in the space.
Yeah, I agree. Bricia has been killing it with being active. OP user as well. Unfortunately, I have actually invited OP user to the podcast, but he's not fully doxxed from my understanding, so he doesn't want to be on video. I do
Yeah.
extend another invitation to him. We can do audio only if he's down to it, but at the end of the day, I have to respect his wishes.
Oh
But
yeah, totally.
other than OP user, is there any other delegate that you'd like to see on the podcast?
Um, yeah, Jack Anorak, I'd love to see him because his views are sometimes contentious, but like so insightful. And he did like a whole series on like what happened to like previous grants. Like he is just like killing it and like the contributions like to the space. I mean, he's like a super like engaged, active delegate. Um, and his views are like always just like so insightful and awesome. So I would love to see him on the podcast too.
Yeah, I definitely want to get Jack and talk and discuss with him. I think he has some good insights to share, which he already does in the forums, but I'd like to get him on the podcast and get others to know him as well.
Yeah,
All right,
totally.
and on a more broader and optimistic note, is there anyone in the collective? It can be an individual, a group, a company, a foundation member that you'd like to give a shout out to for their contributions to the space.
Yeah, so all of my grants council homies, especially Dane, our fearless leader, and Dante, who keeps us like super organized and on track. They're amazing at what they do. And then Michael, who's also on the growth subcommittee with me, and he took over the community calls, which was awesome. Like, and just is totally crushing it. And he's like made it his own thing and does a fantastic job. And then there's Paper Imperium, Matt from Synthetics, Doug, Chris from L2B, who hosted a lovely governance brunch in Paris as well. So thank you for that. And then just any of the active delegates that are like still around and involved, like thank you guys so much for being here. Like Linda, Lefterus, Master Mojo, Minimal Gravitas, Jokes, and Seed Latam, just like anyone that's still around and like actually like engaged still because I feel like there was a lot of involvement in the very beginning and then um I don't know, it seems like engagement kind of dropped off. So like the people that are still here and involved, thank you. Like super stoked that you guys are still around.
Yeah, definitely shout out to all of them. Some very amazing contributors mentioned there. All right, and to wrap things up, now it's your time to share any place that people can learn more about you and can get in touch with you. So if you have a website, your Twitter, delegate communication thread, now it's the time to mention that. And of course, I'll put the links in the description so anybody can easily grab them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter. I think it's just Katie Garcia ETH. Um, I'm always open to like messages if you have questions about the grants program or you just want to chat. I'll be at Permissionless in Austin if anyone wants to meet in person. It's like one of my favorite things, meeting people in person that you've like been interacting with online. Like I love it. Feels like you're meeting up with a long lost friend. The website for my investment firm is udhc.finance if anyone wants to check that out. If you have a cool project that you're working on and want to send me your deck, we're always down to look at it. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm on Discord and the forum like all the time. I don't really have a life, so feel free to message me. I love talking to new people and just like meeting new people in the space. So hit me
Mhm.
up anytime.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll have the links that you mentioned in the description so anybody can easily grab them. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Katie, for being on the show. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I think you have some really important insights to share given your activity both as a delegate but also as a member of the Grants Council.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super honored to be here.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody else for tuning in and listening to the episode.